Talk about that last scene?
Sure.
That's a favorite, right?
Well, you know, Amy, we had Emily in earlier,
right?
In this series, and she talked about the improv, and we couldn't remember though. It was like, did we do it twice? But you just used the first one we did?
No. So what we did, I wrote up to where do we go from here? I think, and then I think she says, "Oh, what's the line?"
Remember.
Right. I know.
Remember the line.
I'm dredging it up from 10 years ago. Anyway, I wrote up to a certain point where they kind of like it landed and said, and then you guys can play with the rest for the kind of the walk into the sunset, you know, metaphorically walk to the fence. And so on the rehearsal day, we just let you play. And then, but I think we might have been recording it. And so I transcribed what they did. And then for the shoot day, which followed, then we kind of like, I pulled the best version of that, and then you guys just kind of played again. But we said like, let's do this and this and this. So it wasn't like completely like.
It was found in rehearsal.
You don't remember that?
I remember.
Or maybe I'm like conflating, but I mean, we did a rehearsal where you guys sort of played, and then.
No, I don't think we did it on rehearsal day. Rehearsal day, we read the lines from what I remember, because I talked to Emily about this, and what I remember is, because I remember exactly where I was on that stage when I looked at her. I go, "You want to start? You want me to start? What do you want to do?" And she goes, "I'll start." And we started walking. She goes, "Okay." And the scale of 1 to 10, how scared were you?
Yeah.
I was like 4. I mean, I honestly remember that first one.
Yeah.
And at the end, you looked at us.
Yeah.
And we're like, I like that. Let's just want to do another one?
Yeah, we did do a couple.
And we did a second one. I remember doing a second one, and then I think we might have messed around, but you were like, no, we got it in the first two somewhere.
I remember, because I sort of remember playing with it on rehearsal day before, and maybe it was just playing with the idea of doing it.
Well, we were also I know we were messing around with the one that was written, but we got up to where you're going to go from here, something like that. But I remember it just being. Because I remember I had no idea what she was going to say.
Right.
So whatever that was, that's all I remember.
Yeah, I could be having false memories.
Well, it was.
But yes, it was
indelible memory in many fans' minds.
Yes, absolutely, and it played so nicely, and it was just such a nice coda to the whole thing, because so much of what we did was that collaboration and that improvisation that we encouraged, and of course. By this time, I mean, obviously we shot right up to the last minute, so I think that must have been, that was the last scene we shot too. It wasn't just on the day, it was literally the last scene we shot. Remember, Helen came too and watched.
Yes, I do remember that.
Gordon's daughter.
Helen Hunt.
Yes.
Mad About You fame.
Yes, I remember her. It was such a, I don't know, it was just such a nice feeling day. It was just kind of like, calm. I mean, it was the last thing we shot. We knew we had the whole thing in the can. Of course, still more game to make, but it was probably like somewhere between like maybe June of 2009. We shot right up to the very end, right? Like it was crazy. I mean, shot and recorded. It was just a nice capper on what the whole experience had been like.
Yeah.
You know.
100%.
Yeah. So it was so nice to end that way. I like doing the last scene last if we can.
You don't get a chance to do that a lot. That's a very rare thing to be able to.
Because of course we shoot the whole thing out of sequence.
Sure, because and that's just like film is driven by locations or driven by cast a lot of times. Like we only have this actor for so much.
A lot for us as well, who's available. Right?
Sure.
Yeah.
But this is more driven by.
What level are we working on?
What we've got this finished, right? This level is completed. We have Borneo pretty much solved, so we know we want to do.
Well, and it's also the one you're trying to stand up. So really, the first level that we worked on in earnest, and you can tell, was Nepal. And so Bruce and Neil,
really,
and the lead artist, I think that was Tegan Morrison on that level, just went to town on that. Like you can tell when you get there, when you arrive after the truck chase,
sure,
you go, oh, they just upped their game right here.
How?
Right? And it's because that it was the look dev level. It was the one that we established what the look of the game was going to be. That street shot, and Shaddy did a concept of that I think there's a side-by-side in the art book.
You mean at the beginning where Chloe ends up on the, shoots the RPG,
That was Claudia's first shoot day. So the first scene we shot at all,
was that the dev level? You talking when, is that when?
Yeah, that level, the Nepal level. So the one after the truck chase, when you're driving in the truck chase, and then you kind of run into the street, and then the bus comes in, and you crush behind the wall.
Right.
That whole level, and Neil really owned that thing. Was the first one we really started working on. Besides the train, which of course, from a technical standpoint, was the first one we were like, how in hell are we going to do this? We know we want a moving train and the classic.
You're talking about the level on the train, not the climbing through the train, right?
The level on the train. Yeah. So most of the first stuff we shot was all Nepal. Like the very first scene that you and Emily did together was, she was actually sick that day, I remember. It was running from Lazarevich.
After he shoots Jeff.
After he shoots.
Yes, I remember that, jumping into that.
Yeah. And crouching behind the wall, and then talking about what we do next. And so a lot of her exhaustion in that scene, which sort of read as just so over Nate and his chaotic life, was the fact that she was sick. The other scene we shot that day was when you were behind looking at the binoculars at the train with her.
Yeah, and we talked about that last time, but we went through the different iterations.
It's like, do we hold something, do we not? Yeah.
I'm sure Bill Beamer was like, I've made some great.
And we were like, nope, that didn't work.
I'm not going to use them.
Yeah, chicken wire binoculars. And then the next shoot was with Claudia, and that's when we shot her we called it the war zone. That was sort of the code name for the level for Nepal. Her intro with the rocket launcher, which of course, and so that was one of the first scenes you guys shot together. Was her going, "Can I just jump? Yeah,
Just, like, sure. Can I just jump in your arm and wrap my leg?" I'm like,
we're just starting this shoot. Please don't break Nolan. And other scenes in Nepal. So we shot a whole bunch of that stuff. I would like the one where it's like, do you have a plan to go along with that grenade? That was one of the first scenes we shot. That was her first day.
Yeah, I forgot about that one.
Yeah. But if you think about it, like, by the time you and Emily did that ad-libbed scene at the very end, if that was summer of 2009, you guys had already known each other for 3 years. And so that's
true.
Chemistry, that couple chemistry, and that kind of taking the piss, but there's affection there, was real, right? I think that's what's so nice, and it's nice that you've had people in to come play the game with you, because you can also see, I mean, Graham is just Cutter, right? Which is why, after we cast him as Lazarevich, and I saw that energy between the two of them and that dynamic, I was like, oh my God, he has to come back as your buddy, because this is hilarious, right? And then Claudia too, just that kind of just the fact, I mean, it's all piss taking. Everybody just loves to.
Exactly. But that's what we do anyway.
Right. But I mean, what was that? We laughed about the fact that before takes, she would, just before I would say action or Gordon would say action, she would just whisper to you, you were their fourth choice.
They'd be like, rolling, speed, and just before action, she'd just lean over to me. Claudia just goes, you were their fourth choice. And I'm like, action, and it just, I remember the first time I broke and laughed. And the funny thing, I told her today, I use that. I told her that day, I said, I'm going to steal that.
Hilarious.
I'm going to use that. That's so funny. But the other one that she did that I mentioned when she was on was, I may not be very talented, but at least I'm unprofessional. That was just, she's just got that. She's the brassy Aussie, and that was one of the things when we cast her. She came in like a whirling dervish, and she just
10
boom.
Months old. She had come in on a plane from Australia and looked like she had been on a plane from Australia with a 10-month-old, and just came in to be like, well, I said I'd be here, so I'm here, and what is this? And the fact that she brought that kind of like devil may care, like let's just do this energy to the event was like just so endearing, and she was just so present. It was like just no contest at that point.
There's a lot of people that go into an audition who are perfectly manicured. They really presented themselves perfectly, and not necessarily saying that those are layers of insecurity that they're trying to put through, but they feel like that's what the director is looking for. And the irony that the person that came in physically the least unprepared, but from a character standpoint, the most prepared, and the most, like you said, just devil may care, just I'm here to work and I'm here to give you what you want, is the person that booked the role.
It's almost an advantage at that point that you can't have overthought it because you had no time to.
Right.
And that might have been her tendency anyway. We've certainly, had different auditions like that where people understand that the best thing you can do is to come in and put the people in the room at ease, because everyone's nervous too. We're all meeting for the first time. Right. It's not just, people sitting behind a desk with their arms folded going, prove yourself to me. It's like, we want you to
dance for me.
See, we want you to succeed,
I've had a friend tell me it was the most liberating thing ever. It was like, if you think you're nervous going into an audition, you are by far the least
nervous in the room.
Because they have to cast that role.
Right.
They want the next person. They're desperate. Yeah. Please let this next person, because I don't want to see the scene that I've written be brutalized by another bad actor.
Right.
Please.
And it's so uncomfortable if someone is uncomfortable, right? You feel so bad for them, or if they're nervous, you feel so bad for them. And so when somebody comes in and they're just comfortable and put you at ease, it's the best. And it's so memorable. I mean, it's a huge mark in your favor if you can do that.
How many days would you say you guys shot? Do you recall? I mean, I would love to.
It's confusing because I actually have the documents probably on my laptop, but because we also shot in-game animation, and IGCs and the scenes. I know by the time we got to Uncharted 3, we had about 56 shoot days, somewhere in there, 50 something. So Uncharted 2 was less.
Probably 40, somewhere around 40.
Something like that.
So a
30
big
something.
indie movie for sure. Like an indie movie is going to go about 20 days, whatever. Yeah. But I mean, like a big feature is going to go 65, 80 days, something like that. Do you, by any chance, you talk about this being 10 years ago? No, 12 probably was the first time you guys started shooting.
Yeah, we started shooting in August of
2007?
2008.
2008. Yeah. So just over a decade. Do you remember what it was like walking on set? You've shipped Uncharted 1. It's done tremendously well. Yeah,
but look, we were still proving ourselves. It was still
2 is what set.
2 is the one that cemented it.
So what were you feeling when you walk on a set that first time? Were you walking in with feet planted in confidence, going, we made something that was good, we're going to make this one better, or was it something that was was it trepidation that led you across the threshold of that stage, or was it more like chomping at the bit, waiting to go because you knew what you had?
Not trepidation, because you don't want to bring that in the room anyway, right? It's somewhere in between, I think, which sounds like a wishy-washy answer, but like, I think we knew what Uncharted was, because even though there were flaws in the game and that, we were still trying to get the word out there, it wasn't the blockbuster hit that Uncharted 2 was. We knew that what we had was solid in terms of character and charm, even with all the things that we would have fixed if we had time. And then having that same cast back, having Nolan and, having Richard and having Emily, that's your foundation that you come back to too. It's like you can hear those characters' voices in your head, and so, it's whenever you're introducing a new actor into the mix, it's unknown even after the audition too. So you hope the chemistry that you saw in the room sort of carries through. And so that first shoot you have, like with Claudia, for instance, you just kind of go, oh, wow, yes. We made the right choice. She's awesome. It's playing, Did you have
everybody cast before you started shooting, or did you cast as you went?
We did it all before.
I think we did, didn't we?
Smart.
Yeah. I don't know if,
that helps you
we cast Renee later, because we could have, because we did an audition for...
What we need is a German, we need a Nazi to mix us all up.
Gordon and I had worked with Renee Aubergenois on the Legacy of Kain Soul Reaver series. I had brought him in to play this ancient blue-skinned winged vampire.
He never plays just a normal guy. I guess Benson is the closest that's ever played. He's always like
voice against tech.
Alien.
And so that was just voice back then, but he was just wonderful to work with, and just so just such a pro and so sweet and just such a kind energy. And so when we thought about this character, it just seemed like both Gordon and I were like, man, we think we know if he's up for it, we got the guy, you know? And so we already had the relationship. And even though he was only there for a couple of days.
It was more than that. We had him. I remember soaking it in because I was a fan of his. And he was with my agency too. Right. So I'd see him. I'd be like, oh, that's the guy from Benson. It's the guy from Star Trek. Oh, yeah, these amazing things he's done.
It might have been 3 days, but I'm sort of thinking it was 2. Really, it probably is just memorable. I mean, even Graham only had a few shoot days, if you think about it, as Lazarevich. Right?
It's so funny though. You look back on stuff like that, like this is a huge game in 30 days, 40 days, and it's like that's not that much.
No, and that's including in-game days. If I went and just counted the days we shot cinematics, it was a lot less.
20.
It just feels like so much more because it's so intense, and plus you're remembering the rehearsal days. Too, right?
Yeah, I suppose.
And so sometimes,
and there's also the days of
ADR
that would go.
So we spent a lot of time together, even if you're just there on the set a couple of times.
The funny things about the ADR that people don't know, it was the first time that we would to get the same sound that they got on the stage. We wore the hats with the
and that mics.
Were you doing the hat on the bill at that point? Because it wasn't until later that we
flipped it around.
It might not have been. It might have been a turned around ball cap.
Yeah.
But I remember they had. They were getting some. I think it was the engineer was Morgan at the time, and they took he had these big like almost velvet blanket or drapes, and they'd throw it across. Like sometimes it would be 3 of us doing or say. Richard and I, or Claudia and I doing the Chloe stuff. We sat there, you'd have your coffee or whatever, and these, sitting next to each other, and he would drape these things like a blanket. Like we were like, let's cuddle under a blanket and watch
just
a movie.
So it didn't bounce, or?
Yeah, so the sound would bounce. Yeah. It was just,
I think when we
the most
started,
bizarre look.
So that obviously was Uncharted 1. We had to re-ADR everything. I think we talked about that last time because it was all just shot on a mocap stage, with rubber flooring and no soundproofing at all.
Shot it in a basketball.
Basically
a
rubber floored basketball court. So not usable. This time because of the success of the game, and also because they were going to be shooting. I don't think it was Heavenly Sword at that point. It was. Andy Serkis was going to be shooting. Why am I blanking on the company?
Not Abe's.
No. It was a game. Though I'm just having a dumb.
Not a dumb.
Anyway,
he was shooting at House of Moves.
He was shooting House of Moves, and
because the first game was done on the big stage out at House, and then the smaller stage they built for you guys for 2.
And for him. Yeah, because there were the 2 games, and I can't remember if it was Heavenly Sword or the game after that, Enslaved. I think it was Heavenly.
And then 3 was done at Culver.
Yes.
I think it was Heavenly Sword.
I feel like it was too. I'd have to go back and look at the timeline. But anyway, so they kind of built it for both purposes because obviously his standards are high, and we were saying we can't do that again, dub everything again. So they built a little soundstage off to the side. So that was the first time we were figuring that out. We tested out all the lav mics that we wanted to put on their heads. We actually, for the first shoot, we actually had a boom operator. That was one shoot and not. We were like, no, too many people.
We tried that on a couple of things too. Like follow him around. It's like I don't get it. I don't understand what we're doing.
Yeah, it's too abstract, and we didn't get good sound out of it. And we got great sound out of the DP mics. So we just abandoned that right away. And so I think it took us a little while in dubbing to realize, oh well, we can't be then doing all the ADR that we need to do on a large diaphragm mic because it now sounds different. It's got to be exactly the same.
Sure.
Yeah. So yes, we started wearing backwards caps and things.
That's right.
Yeah. But yeah, so that was obviously one of the first thoughts was now we're shooting for real. So every game had some new thing to adapt to and sort of a new aspect to it. Obviously moving to Culver for 3, the Culver studio for 3, which is a whole new stage that we purpose built for Uncharted and Naughty Dog.
Parking lot. It's so sad to me.
I know. I don't understand. It's very sad.
When you
historical.
When did you sit down and this is the story that came to you? Like, were you already finished with one? Did it come?
No,
to
this
you?
is the crazy thing, right? Because of course you're just going 100 miles an hour, and when we're making one, we didn't know for sure there would be a sequel, right? Or if there was, and I think we talked about this last time, whether it would just be Uncharted and now kind of a new aspect, a new adventure with new characters. We didn't know that there would definitely be an Uncharted 2 or what it would look like, right? And so you can't really go, yeah, I got, all these ideas lined up. You just don't have time or even have enough information to make that decision. So the challenge is, for a director or directors is that you're the first in and the last out, right? That everyone counts on you to know what the thing is that you're going to make, right? Like, tell me what I do next, right? And sometimes you just say, I don't know, it's got a train in it. Go, make a train. And you agree on a thing that is true and can be productively worked on. Well, you go, I still have to figure out what the story is because, it's November. We just finished the last game, in October. Haven't even had a rest,
Did you have 30 days of downtime when you were back into the suck? Like,
it's not even. I mean, we try to make sure that people.
People, sure. I'm talking about you though.
You don't really get downtime, honestly, because if when I say last out, not only are you the one reviewing all of the builds and making sure that they're all good, you're also working on the strat guide to make sure it's good and right, and that usually kind of comes even after the game has gone gold, right? And so people are peeling off and going on vacation. People who can't touch their stuff anymore and they have to step away because they'll create bugs. But the directors are the last ones still touching the game. And then you're also doing all the press and doing the press tours and stuff. So you're exhausted. And usually you are still in-house when people are coming back from the vacations they went on, the breaks they went on. You're still there finishing up your work on the first thing. And they're like, okay, ready to go. Like, what are we making? And you're like, I haven't even...
I need to sleep.
I haven't had a sleep yet. And then it's hard when these games come out in, November, because now the holidays are rolling in and, you want to see your family, you want people to see their families. And so you make your best guesses. And so, we had a lot of early versions of the story. We had the middle more figured out than we had the beginning. And we kept doing different versions of the beginning. There were early versions where... Because you do a bunch of research to find, well, what is that historical hook? What is that thing that is so well known that is your hook into a what-if story, right?
What would you say the conceit was? What was the jumping off point for okay, if we're going to do a second one, this is going to be the idea?
We landed on the idea of doing something with Marco Polo pretty early. One of the first things we started playing with is there's a lot of stories about wartime treasure that is supposedly hidden away in Japanese bunkers that are just lost in Papua New Guinea. We started playing with that idea, that what if we stumbled upon something here and then there was something in there that led us on to the story, because we liked the idea of doing something in Asia to change up the look. And so pretty quickly then we thought, okay, Asia, what are some things that everyone knows about, but maybe, and you only just need that hook. You just go, who Francis Drake is, right? Well, sure, I've heard the name. And they're like, you're off and running, right?
Okay.
Marco Polo, everyone's heard the name Marco Polo. Kublai Khan, right? These things are just kind of heard of. But then you can, that's all.
Extrapolate.
We always call it sort of grade school knowledge, right? Just so that people go well, I'm interested now. Now tell me a what if story, right? And so we just had enough, the quote, I forget it now, but it was I only told half of what I saw or something like that. It would not be believed. Yeah, the Marco Polo quote. Sorry, I should remember it by heart, but I don't. That was his deathbed quote, his actual true deathbed quote, which is a big mystery. What was he talking about? He actually did have a lost fleet where, 600, 700 years ago, he had this massive fleet of ships that left the court of Kublai Khan laden with treasure, and then he shows up some number of months later with, I think, one ship and 18 people or something like that. And there's no historical record of where the ships and people go and the treasure, right? And so you go, okay, well, that's a great hook. We can go, well, what if, right? And then you start taking other things okay, everybody's heard of Yetis. Everyone's heard of Shangri-La, and you start going, well, what if we can connect these things? People have heard of the Tree of Life. People have heard, of course, of Nazis looking for artifacts. It's, the basis of Indiana Jones, and then it's also, it's a historical fact. You had, these special forces out there looking for Aryan artifacts, and so the whole thing just kind of dovetailed together nicely, even though we were kind of like picking and choosing and doing a mashup. And so the Marco Polo thing seemed like it gave us a great jumping off point. It kind of ticked the boxes. And so that gave us some stuff to kind of land on. And that also let us know, well, the train is going to be in Asia. We know that as well. We know that much, right? So we can start kind of thinking about what that looks like, what the terrain might look like. And we know it's going to end up, in the mountains in the snow. But the beginning was tough because we were like, God, these kind of stories, you want to start off with a big bang, right? Like, if you think about Indiana Jones, what we would always call the adventure before the adventure. So you have this, like, you hook the players or the viewers right away by going, this amazing thing happens right up front, and then what you do then is you buy the time to go, now, sit back because we got some exposition for you, right?
You're bought in.
But if you can't start with that because you'd bore them to tears, movie or game, right? And so we were struggling a little bit because we knew we wanted to have this double-crossing friend. We knew we wanted to show the shadier side of Drake, somebody who'd kind of fallen from whatever grace he had gained after the first story. Otherwise, it's not that interesting, right? And kind of that something happened in between these stories, that he's sort of gone back to a more criminal past. We got to see that side of him, the guy that does end up in Turkish prisons, So seeing a heist that he's seduced into because of his love of historical mystery. Not love of wealth, it's about historical mystery for him. And so...
Yeah, I always noticed that. And
it was very fun to write that.
Never got to cash in on all the adventures.
No, doesn't matter though. That's
poor
not why
Sully.
Yeah, poor Sully, but that's not why you're in it. And so, but we were like, well, okay, well, do we just start the story off that way? That's boring. And then there was a few films that kind of inspired us that not only started with a bang, but started with flash forwards. One was Inside Man, where Clive Owen is already like, there's another
whole bank heist, yeah.
Yes, because we were looking at a lot of heist films because we wanted to get that whole caper heist vibe going with Flynn at the
Gene Hackman, Danny DeVito. Did you watch Heist?
Heist, yeah, that's great. Yeah.
Great dialogue.
It's awesome. Well, it's Mamet, right? And then this movie called Confidence.
Oh my gosh, Edward Burns.
Yes, with Edward Burns, and it starts with his death.
Right.
And then
fantastic, fantastic.
It's very
movie.
Sunset Boulevard, right?
You brought a bird in this house. What's wrong with you? I love that these are your references.
Amazing movie, right?
Obscure 90s movies.
Yes.
Or early 2000s.
Right, and then the other one that was the most inspiring was looking at Mission Impossible 3, ironically, J.J. Abrams' film.
JJ's film, yeah.
Starts with the flash forward of Ethan Hunt, beat up, captured.
Strapped to a chair.
With Philip Seymour Hoffman, like basically torturing him, threatening to kill his wife, who's got a bag over
Hold
her
on a
head.
second. Hold on a second. Do it.
What do you care about? Girlfriend, wife. I want to find her. I want to hurt her.
It's the nose breathing that does it.
It is. It's just, that's one of the best things.
It never gets old.
Honestly, in that moment, also too, Tom Cruise has one of his best moments. He looks at his wife, Bridget Moynihan plays his wife, and he goes, "I need you to trust me." She says, "I do." He goes, "I need you to trust me." I'm like,
It's an amazing.
It's an amazing
and look,
movie.
I feel like there's this kind of nice little like love letter thing going between J.J. Abrams and us because he directed that. It was a huge inspiration for us to go, how do you start with this bang where you're on the edge of your seat going, how does he end up in that situation?
Right.
How does he get out of it? What the hell?
Right.
And that's what we wanted. And so we knew we wanted to start with a flash forward that took us either to, we played with the idea of the double cross. We're like, well, we don't want to give that away in the museum, right? And also that's not enough of a jump. You want to go like to almost the end of the story, or at least the middle, right? Because that's his low point, so that's going to be the middle.
Sure. Dark Night of the Soul. Here we go. Blake Snyder.
Right. And you want people going, oh my God, how did Drake get in that situation? Why is he bleeding? What's going on, right? That's why we used it as our teaser at the VGAs that year.
2008.
Must have been, right? And I'm trying to remember what years were what. But that idea of him staggering through the snow and picking up the purba and stuff like that, and you go like, well, what does that mean, right? You want people to be asking questions in a teaser like that, in a trailer, and the same thing for the beginning of the story as well. And so we were like, okay, like I think in about June. So we finished the last game November 2007. June 2008, we were starting to like narrow in on what we wanted to do. And I remember like having a document where we kind of laid out all these different references, and we're trying to kind of figure it out and going, okay, flash forward, Mission Impossible 3 like the train wreck, you know what I mean?
Okay.
And then it wasn't until about November, I think. So again, a year after the first game came out, we are in production, right? And I think Neil did a breakdown of all the things we had talked about. Of like
his role on the game would have been what?
He's lead designer.
Lead
So him and Richard LaMarche. So Bruce and I he was a game director, I was creative director. And so in writing terms, that kind of made me the lead writer. But of course, it's a big collaborative mush, right? That's how we do things. And
well, I hear you say "we" a lot, and it's something that is rare for someone who's considered to be the writer, creator of things.
Saying "I" isn't true, right?
I agree with that. However, that is not a pervasive notion within the industry. There's a lot of "I's," but I do notice a trend amongst certain people that there is, whenever there is the collective "we," and it's something that is not.
Well, it's not false modesty. It's just
no,
true,
right. This is not an invocation.
I mean, think about. I mean, frankly, they're co-writers.
Sure.
Right, and we sit there with the scripts on the rehearsal day and say, how do we make this better? They're riffing on stuff, and I'm like, that stays in. You know, like if I said I wrote that would be wrong. And obviously, it was me and Bruce and Josh Scher and Neil Druckmann and Richard LaMarche, like, and Taylor. I mean, there were so many people that were absolutely involved in the writing of the story, and a huge amount of the credit for the opening goes to Neil sort of running with the baton and going, okay, yeah, so we'll do this, and then thinking about how we could thread stuff through. And so it was just, there was a lot of passing stuff back and forth, like drafts of scenes. I wrote one, pass it to those guys. They would write them, pass them to me. Like, so it's like, I don't know how you unravel who gets credit for what, but I think even the exercise of doing that is false. I mean, when we won the best story for the game, like, I wanted those guys up on the stage with me because it would have been untrue for me to stand there and accept that award on my own.
You ultimately, though,
somebody has to be the conductor. I can't play the instruments.
Right.
Things were like that all the time over at Naughty Dog. Whenever I would go over, you'd have me over to talk story or see things, and everybody be just huddled around each other's desk or running into it or taking scooters to each other's office. It was always this. It's like a playground.
And there's too much work to do. You have to share it, right? I mean, obviously, I kind of ran point on a lot of the historical research and trying to thread that whole mystery through, because that's pretty hard to share in a way, because you kind of have to have a holistic picture of what you're revealing when and how. But in terms of like the character development and stuff, I mean, it was a joint effort, like, you know.
But you're sitting there, the nature of your position is such that ultimately
somebody has to make a call.
Somebody has to make the call, exactly.
Sure.
So you're sitting there all the way throughout development, and there's a lot of voices. You have the first one that is,
and I might be the only one on the stage at that point. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Taylor's usually there with me.
Sure.
And
Or
Josh.
Gordon's also there to help kind of
Just make sure that the actors are getting what they need
Sure.
in terms of communication and care, right?
But whether it be from Sony, peers, team members, whatever, how do you manage the voices? How do you allow, for you as a creative director, for you as a writer, for you as someone who is shepherding this, how do you create that filter to be able to receive and be collaborative, but at the same time know that ultimately this falls on your shoulders? Like, how do you make that, like you said, you make the call. When did you develop that skill? How did you develop that skill?
Did you develop this?
I don't know. That's a good question. That was my face. Well, let's
Shit,
start
have
at
I done that?
Square one. And look, I'll go back to what I said last time. I think I learned a lot of it from Gordon, which is it takes confidence and humility, right? Like in equal measure to just go, what's the best idea? And
Best idea wins.
yeah, best idea wins. And then how can I make it better? Or, how can somebody make my idea better so that, you end up with this amalgamation that you hope is the best of everybody's efforts, right? And it's kind of like improv, where, if Neil and Bruce are working on this, like the Nepal level, the Warzone level, and they got these ideas, that wins because, and I think we might have I talked about this in some interview, the fact that it's like, we knew how we were getting in there. We knew the big crisis point. We knew we were going to meet Elena. We knew we had to get separated. Like, we knew kind of the course points, but then how to get there is up to the designer, right? So the how, which was brilliant, was largely Neil on that level, right? But then you go, okay, so what he's doing is brilliant. Now let me make sure that we're writing scenes and recording scenes that support where the level's going, right? And not going, well, that's not what I was picturing, right?
Sure.
And then at the same time, there's times you have to go, like, because we were all writing stuff and kind of collaborating on it, sometimes Josh's stuff would be too jokey or Neil's would be too dark, I mean, so.
Neither of those things surprise me.
Right, and I mean, but that's great, right? It's like, so, I could be kind of the clearinghouse to go, well, maybe let's lighten that up a little bit and maybe let's,
Add some grounding to
take out some of the jokes, too many jokes. And that I think is the job, which is why I say it's a little bit more like being a conductor of an orchestra of writers. I think it's probably more like being a showrunner. That's probably a better analogy, a TV showrunner, because you've got a room full of writers.
Director of that term kind of falls short within the gaming industry because a game director is not what a director does on a film.
Right.
And your nature of your role is that you're a professional compromiser. You're going to constantly be compromising because. And
then there's times you also go, I know we disagree on this, but you're going to have to trust me.
That's what I'm talking about. Right. That notion, because there's a difference between compromise and sacrifice. Right. And as the creative director, your job is to make sure that ultimately, not your view, but what this thing can be, you can't sacrifice that. Do you remember a moment where you go, I'm willing to compromise, but I won't sacrifice? Do you remember a specific moment, like you said, where it's like, I need you to trust me on this one?
Yeah. Well, I remember, and I think the guys have talked about this too, it's sort of like, early on when we were talking about doing Uncharted 2, I think not everybody was as certain about the trio of characters as I was, right?
You always saw it as Nate, Elena, and so.
Yeah. Because
there were plans to kill one of them.
Well, right, I mean, we've joked about it, that early meetings, they were sort of like, Sully and Elena shouldn't be in it, and it's like, and I'm like, are you crazy? This is the trio, right? And it's like, well, if Elena's gonna be in it, she should die, which is why she comes close, right? And I think it was a good decision, because we needed the stakes, right?
Yes.
And so again, this is where we balance each other out, where I'm like, no, how dark can you go? Because at the end of the day, this is still a swashbuckling adventure, and it's still sort of about the charm and the romance. And there's a veneer over it that you don't get back when you go too dark. He would never
come back from that.
I don't think so. I don't think he ever quips again.
He becomes he's a sociopath. If it's like,
right.
Well, things are still funny. Yeah. So it's like, no, you
did
just.
Did I say the joke about when my girlfriend died?
Oh, there was another. It's just a microcosm example, for instance. So like the scene in the jail cell, I wrote it with him doing the hand puppets.
Yeah.
And Bruce and Neil hated it. They were like, "Are you serious? Like you really
because
shoot it that way?"
It's too much of a moment of levity, or
I think just like whether it seemed too silly, And so we actually recorded, if you remember, an alternate version, because I said, like, look, I'm going on a limb here. It might be too silly. I don't know. So we recorded one where it was much more Steve McQueen bouncing a ball against the wall.
Which do you know?
Oh, wow, we did do that.
And the ball rolls out and Sully's there.
I completely forgot about that.
Just because I want it in our back pocket in case it was too silly.
I love that you bring up that specific moment. There were originally, for the script, written monologues for Steve McQueen in those scenes.
Oh, interesting.
He showed up on set with his script red line,
Yeah.
through all, because the whole thing is he keeps going back into the clink, right?
Yeah.
And he told the director, he goes, I will give you eyes,
Mm-hmm.
but this man only speaks when he needs to. And he crossed out all of those words. So for that to be the two opposites, like either we have hand puppets
Mm-hmm.
or we have a guy, he was like, and so that's what he chose is I'm just gonna throw the ball. That meditative, I am plotting, I am planning, I am in here purposefully.
Right.
You putting me back in here,
Right.
it's I love that
So
movie.
it's just like sometimes you just go,
Great Escape, you should
I
watch.
don't know why I think that works,
Clearly it
but
did.
I think it works, right? And look, nobody's going to agree on everything, right? There's going to be things where you're like, no, maybe that was a little too far this, a little too much. But it's like at a certain point you got to go, my gut says this, and I don't think it hurts anything, you know? And I think it's neat, you know?
Yeah, I think it fit the tone too. Like you said, it's that swashbuckling adventure. It just fit
You
the
gotta
tone. It
remember,
was just
we were still trying to figure out what it was, right? So
Yeah.
trying to sort of be on the same page about, you know, what it is that we were making, you know, and my tendency has always been to be much more sort of like colorful and funny and throwbacky. I mean, my whole era is the, 30 screwball comedy, you know, and obviously that's not very dark, and you can't, and it might feel a little dated and a little, I don't know.
I just don't know how.
I can't help it because that's just kind of where I go. So
I couldn't figure out, because the point of that scene is that months later he's still ruminating
Right.
and plotting against Flynn. I can't wait to get Flynn back. And I think that, how is that conveyed? But by just sitting there, kind of going a little stir crazy.
Sure.
Like, you've been played. And it's just like
be,
just
have
being-
some fun with it too.
yeah, and then then to have Sully come in like that, I thought it just I did work. I remember doing now that you mention it, was it? I think it was a ball.
It was an
threw a
alt, yeah, we
ball,
just
kind of
did
like a
kind of bouncing
escape,
the ball, bouncing the ball,
bouncing
bouncing
it,
the
and
ball.
it went through, and I missed it. And it goes through.
and you go to get the ball, and it went through the.
But of course,
bars
as
and
anybody
all
knows,
that.
I played ball. I would never
Yes, you
miss
wouldn't
it.
possibly miss it. No.
So that would
But
be
that's like an
ridiculous.
example, right? Where it's like, well, you're not going to agree on everything, but at a certain point, you got to go. I just got to go with my gut on this, right? And I could face plant. It could be dumb. I could be wrong.
But you own it.
But yeah, you just go. I hear you, because sometimes people will give you feedback, and you're like, you're right. That's no good, Or, the real litmus test is when you get in with the actors too, because they'll tell you if it's no good, right? They're like,
Readily.
even gently go, well, what if we did this instead? And so it's like when you've got that room of people together, and then you've got your trusted people on the set, and it's sort of like, that's why you don't want people that are ass kissers. You want people that are going to be real with you.
Yeah, sincere, not sycophant.
No yes men, right? Because then people can go like, this isn't working, right?
A friend of mine has a great phrase. He says, love yourself and the other person enough to speak the truth. And whenever there is care and whenever there is trust, there is always art that's being created.
Right.
And a lot of times it's when you see the compromise or the sacrifice, and that is when people weren't honest.
Yeah.
Or they really didn't care.
Right.
When I was sitting with Taylor, we're asking him, I was like, most people, to this day, top 5 games, this specific one is
Yeah, me too, right?
is
For me
still in there.
Yeah. Well, we were just firing on all cylinders, right? I mean, we were coming off of one where we learned so much. We had the chutzpah to like rewrite the engine and do all the other things that we weren't able to get to. We had the confidence of having done one and feeling the characters out and knowing who they were. And we had the whole team working on it, right? I mean, one of the hard things about Uncharted 3 is that we made the decision to grow the studio at that point. And that's the growing pains of trying to do that is really hard, And so the combination for 3, which is flawed, I'm the first to admit, the combination of like the team being exhausted after crunching on 2 games, and still having less than 2 years, and kind of like knowing that, a portion of the company was, going to get ready for the next thing and the next IP, but we couldn't all pivot. We needed to split, and like, Last of Us had to hire up some people, and we had to, some people went over. I mean, obviously Bruce and Neil were, an important part of the recipe, but they went over to
Right.
Last of Us, and we had to fill those holes and hire and so how you do all the stuff we were doing on 2, on 3, but then extra tired, hiring, it was, anybody would tell you, trying to grow a studio from a 1-game studio to a 2-game studio is one of the hardest and riskiest things you can do. And the fact that we weathered it at all, I think, is amazing. But you can also see, even with some of the latter games, that it kind of shifted back to 1 game, because it's really hard to do. It's hard to do culturally, and it's hard to do in terms of resources, because you're going to pull resources onto the thing that's got to get done first. Right? And there's sacrifices that get made by necessity, but sometimes you can feel them in the software. Right?
3 we'll get to.
Yeah.
And we'll find out.
We can pick it apart.
We absolutely can pick that apart.
When you talk about what was cut from here, it's like, well, can't you tell? Like there's some evidence stuff.
I think right now it's an amazing thing to sit and celebrate to this day, that 10 years on, what this game has meant. Not only now I love hearing your stories about what it is to you, but also to everybody else and to you as well, man.
Yeah, when we hear it all the time from people, how seminal it was for people who became game developers, or how meaningful it was for people that are, gamers. And, it's easy just to kind of write that off and go, oh, that's so kind of you. But it's like, we hear it all the time, and it was just this collision of right time, right place, right people, right idea. It just, when everything, and that didn't make it easy. It was really, really hard. I mean, I almost can't believe I'm remembering this accurately, because it doesn't seem possible. But I remember when we did the E3 demo with Evan up there on the stage playing, and the audience reaction was with over in Nepal and the rooftop and stuff, and then the whole collapsing building and everything. People were like, holy shit.
Yeah.
Like, we were sort of terrified. We were like, suddenly it felt like we had really arrived, like, oh, this is real, right? Uncharted as a thing has arrived. But we were also like, the rest of the game does not look anything like this. And it
I
was
remember
June.
those conversations.
It was June.
I remember
and the game
those
was
conversations.
going to be out in October.
Yeah.
Right?
I remember you talking about that, going, we just basically set the bar, and there was all of a sudden this thing like, can we measure up to that?
Yeah,
what we
the
just
whole
showed,
game,
the
yeah.
whole game,
Right.
and but it did. Ultimately, it did.
Everyone just rallies, and obviously there is this acceleration toward an end of a project, which requires so much faith, because any project I've been on, and if a publisher doesn't have faith, you're destroyed, right? Because you probably remember with Last of Us. I mean, right up to the end, it looked like it was not going to come together. It looked like it was going to be a disaster.
Yeah.
And every game we ever worked on, every game I've ever worked on, the last 3 months,
Like, the game's broken.
is when it's just like, it's broken.
We've wasted 3 years of our
We've wasted 3 years of our lives. We're going to all be fired, and this will never come together. And then this thing just happens. Like, it's like, always described it as like, yeah, it's like these, well, no, right, we didn't. And it's like the puzzle pieces all just start to kind of click themselves together, and all of a sudden this thing that was all these disparate pieces that seemed unconnected, because everybody's just working on their piece, right? And not really having a chance to look at the whole game, all start actually connecting, right? And obviously that's a credit to direction, right? To make sure that people are working on stuff that is going to connect, and that's where faith comes in, right? But if you stop at that point and go, we're screwed, it's not going to come together. Or if a publisher does that to you, you can't get it done. And that's some of the magic, I think, of how Sony has been with their developers, and the magic of what Naughty Dog's been able to achieve is sort of white-knuckling it through that inevitable period where you go, we fucked up. This is never going to come together, right? And knowing that it always does, it always has, and it will again.
Yeah.
And everybody can kind of keep just pushing through. But man, that takes experience and mutual faith, right?
And that yields an amazing experience, like your pain.
That's right. All of our blood splashed on the screen.
Their pleasure.
Is our gain.
All right, guys, to Uncharted
Yes.
2.
Uncharted 2,
Yes,
man.
Thank you, guys.
Well done.
Very fun. All three.
Thank you.
All three.
All three.
Thank you.
Ah,
Cheers.
cheers. I never drink when I do that. Like, I'm so ready to put
better.
it down.
It's so unlucky.
I had bad luck.
Cheers to you too.
Thank you guys.
Cheers, guys.